Graham Glasgow. So Detroit Lions re-sign him and bring him back, or should they let him walk into free agency? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video, so let's get it started. That is right, everybody. Welcome back to another video. We're talking about Graham Glasgow, like I just mentioned a few seconds ago before that intro, the little, you know what I'm saying, like the little intro thing started. I don't know what I'm going for here, dog. This is like my fourth time recording this for some weird issue, so I'm sorry. I'm kind of losing my mind at this point, but we're going to hop right into this. We're going to be looking at whether or not we should bring back Graham Glasgow, and if we don't, what are our options, all right? So let's just hop right into it. So Graham Glasgow, who we drafted back in 2016 in the third round, has been a very good pick for us. He's been a very versatile player that can play pretty much every offensive line position, and he's not very old. He's been very reliable, and he's one of our most talented offensive linemen. That's one of the biggest pieces on our offensive line that has a few holes, but yet he's one of our most reliable players that when injuries strike, he's able to move around and fill out that position. He was playing at center. Frank Ragnow wanted to move back to center, so he moved to right guard, didn't miss a beat. We were still fine offensively. Actually, we were a little bit better on the offensive line because Graham Glasgow still did his thing, and Frank Ragnow got better, being more comfortable in his position that he played more at during college. So definitely a vital piece of this offense, and he's not super old either. He's going to turn 28 years old by the time next season starts because he turns 28 in July, so early happy birthday. I don't know. Anyways, his projected contract, we're going to be looking at that first. Projected contract looks like 4 or 5 years, anywhere from $8 million to $9 million at the top end. I'm going to go with the top end just to assume that he's getting paid the most. And yeah, it's not really that crazy to ask for $9 million a year. I know it sounds crazy when you think we have $52 million in cap room, but it's really not that bad for him to be asking for $9 million a year. That's kind of where the offensive line is going to get paid this year, where he sits. He's actually a really good offensive line for what we're asking for. We pretty much got a steal here in 2016, who since his rookie season has been very good with the Detroit Lions. So the first question we're going to be answering today is, why would you extend? Why would you extend a guy like Graham Glasgow? Well, the first reason is because he protects the most important position on the field, and that is the quarterback position. Look, Matthew Stafford had to deal with some injuries in the last few years with back problems, and last year was the first time he significantly missed time. Wow, I did not mean to do that. That was pretty cool. Either way, that means you have to have guys that are protecting Matthew Stafford. And Graham Glasgow was one of our most reliable players when it came to protecting Matthew Stafford. Not only was he healthy all the time, but he was also a very good offensive lineman. And he was from Michigan, so he's a little bit better. Anyways, he protects the most important position on the field. With Stafford already dealing with some injuries, anytime you lose out one offensive lineman and you downgrade from that position and you don't know what the future looks like of that position, it's not always a great thing. We know Matthew Stafford is our most valuable asset. When you lose every single game without him, it's pretty obvious that you need him on the field, all right? It's pretty obvious that we needed him. We could have went 0-16 without him. Let's just think about that. Well, we have, maybe not. We could have went 0-16 without Matthew Stafford. So it's definitely important to protect the best quarterback that you have. Well, obviously, one of the best in the league. It's important to protect that guy. And losing out on Graham Glasgow automatically downgrades your offensive line and adds another need for you. Right now, the offensive line is pretty good in some spots. Center spot when Frank Ragnow moved back there from right guard because, again, a guy like Graham Glasgow can move around, so he's got the versatility to help out other players because he can move the right guard. So he moved to right guard. Frank Ragnow moved back to center. He was even better there because that's where he was more comfortable with from college at Arkansas. We know we had Graham Glasgow, who's another great player. And at left tackle, Taylor Decker was starting to come into his own. So we had some pieces. We just had a few holes. Left guard was a little bit shaky. We had a couple of guys that were just kind of subbing in back and forth. And right now we'd have Joe Dahl there. Kenny Wiggins set to become a free agent. So we would have Joe Dahl starting there if we needed to. And at right tackle, Rick Wagner definitely had a down year. And that's one of the question marks, I guess, offensively as well. So if you get rid of a guy like Graham Glasgow, you're now opening potentially 3 holes, but one main hole where you need to upgrade a right guard position. You don't really have a right guard that you can just go with if you have to, other than Terrell Crosby, who's not really a right guard. He could just kind of go there because he can do a lot of different things. And I'm very grateful that we have Terrell Crosby, but is that necessarily the guy you want to be starting? Not really. You know, you don't ever want to take just a complete downgrade at a position that you already need to upgrade, right? Right tackle's already questionable, left guard's questionable, and now you're going to make right guard questionable. That's something to worry about. Now, there is a thing called an offseason where you can, make changes and bring other guys in. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. Another reason we shouldn't bring him back, like I said, he's, he can play both center and guard position, which is awesome. He can pretty much play throughout the entire offensive line, so that's really good. Maybe not tackles, but in the inside, you can kind of move around everywhere he wants to go. He's very reliable. And he's only missed 2 games in his entire career. In his 4-year career with Detroit Lions, he's missed 2 games as a player. 2. That's awesome. I mean, that's a guy that's on the field all the time, and you need that because there are a lot of offensive linemen out there that are very good, but they cannot stay healthy at all. And we'll look at one of those. Very great player, just can't stay healthy. A lot of missed games. And a guy like Graham Glasgow doesn't do that, and you need those guys on the field. We saw last year that the most important thing in a player is actually being able to play. We didn't have a lot of guys that could play last season. Graham Glasgow is one of the guys that we've seen that have been able to play. He hasn't been dealing with all these injuries. Knock on wood, it's been awesome for him, and that's another reason to bring him back. His Pro Football Focus grades since his rookie season have been out of the charts good. Rookie year, not very good, but hey, that's kind of expected. However, since then, in 2017, he had a 71.1 Pro Football Focus grade. In 2018, a 70.1 Pro Football Focus grade. And in 2019, his best Pro Football Focus grade was at a 74.1. Pro Football Focus kind of takes all the advanced stats and metrics and just throws them all to one and gives you an overall grade. And that's honestly really good. That's an above average type of player. That's a good player according to Pro Football Focus. So that's what we have at the guard position currently in Graham Glasgow. And like I mentioned before, his rookie year wasn't very good, and he was a third-round pick. Keep in mind that when you think of, hey, we could just grab a guard and he can just automatically replace him. I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of good players at the third round, because there are a lot of players that I'm interested in around that time. However, it doesn't always equal come in and start. Sometimes it means, hey, your first year is going to be a little ugly, and then in the next couple of years, you'll start to get things rolling. So that could be the case. So think about that. If you brought in another right guard from the first round, you're expecting him to come in day one start, he could have a lot of shakiness in his game, all right? He could have a lot of things that he needs to improve on that will happen with time, but in a year that you think you must win with Matt Patricia and Bob Quinn, that may not be the best answer. A lot of people look at the guard position as maybe the least important position on the offensive line. I'm not exactly sure why, but they say like, hey, if there's one position that you want to leave, that's the guard position. You know, you need tackles. I agree with that. Tackles are probably the most important. That's why I really want to upgrade the tackle position. And then they say guards aren't super important. However, when you're trying to run the football, guards are obviously completely important. You need to be able to run the football, and obviously stopping some of them big defensive tackles that run through the middle. Guards have a very important job. A guy like Graham Glasgow that can move all around is a super important job. Now, what if we don't resign him? What if we say, you know what, hey, we're not going to pay that much money. Graham Glasgow, you go test free agency, do what you want to do. Then what happens? Well, then you have two options. You either have free agency or you have the draft. And like I said before, this kind of opens up three needs, and that's where I'm a little bit concerned offensively. I think bringing in Graham Glasgow allows you to look at other positions like right tackle, potentially left guard. But if you don't bring back Graham, you could have the potential of Rick Wagner being your starting right tackle next season, or left guard being Joe Dahl next season. And if you're okay with that, then hey, more power to you. But if you're not okay with that and you're looking at that and you're like, ooh, yeah, I don't know if I want to rock with Rick Wagner again and Joe Dahl at the left guard spot, then this may not be the move for you, because if this happens, then you're going to have to fill in two needs. I'm not saying that's impossible, but again, look at our defense. We have a lot of needs there already. And you can make the case with that the money that we save from not bringing him back, you go get another offensive line. It would be like you're not losing anything. However, Graham Glasgow has been here for 4 years. He's comfortable with this offense, and he's proven to be a very good offensive lineman for us. Bringing in a guy from another team doesn't automatically mean that he's going to be good off as a player. I mean, he could be. It's not like other positions. Like quarterback's a little bit more risky. You bring in a quarterback from one system to another, he could definitely be a lot worse. Offensive line, they pretty much have the same responsibilities, so usually they're going to be okay. But hey, there is always a little bit of risk factor that goes into it, especially when you're talking about draft picks. So now let's hop into some potential replacements. First off, we're going to be looking at some offensive linemen, comparing how much they're looking to get paid and what their projected contract looks like compared to Graham Glasgow's, and then looking at some draft options. All right, so we're going to start off with the offensive linemen that would be available in free agency. So at the right guard position, you're getting, there's a few good players and there's a lot of average players, I would say. Players that may be a little bit under Graham Glasgow, maybe similar to how good he is as a player. And I was also looking at players that aren't like 34 years old. I think at that point, you're not really improving. And I also do think this offensive line is built for the future, with Frank Ragnow being so young, with Taylor Decker still being young. That right guard spot, I don't think you need to go 23, but 28, 29, maybe 30, that's fine. Now, if you're getting into the 35 range, then I think you're pushing it a little bit. I don't know if I want to go get a 35-year-old, but I guess if you had to, then hey, you got to do what you got to do. However, the first guy we're going to be looking at is Brandon Sheriff, who's just a little bit older than Graham Glasgow. He is one of the best offensive linemen that are available that plays the right guard spot. The problem with Brandon Sheriff, like I said before, is injuries. He has a 75 Pro Football Focus grade last season, which is just a little bit better than Graham Glasgow. Keep that in mind, just a little bit better. And he's projected to make over $13 million a year. So $4+ million than Graham Glasgow every single year. Not only that, he's missed 15 games in the last 3 years. 15 games in 3 years. That's not something I really want to play around with. Yeah, he's talented. And yeah, if he doesn't get hurt, he'll be very good. But he's probably going to get hurt. And I don't know. I just don't think that one makes a lot of sense. The next guy we're going to be looking at, Joe Thuney. Now, Joe Thuney has been even better Pro Football Focus-wise. Now, I guess he does play a little bit more left guard than anything at New England. But hey, for the sake of this, we'll throw him in the right guard and assume that he can play the right guard position, all right? So, Joe Thuney, who had a 77.4 Pro Football Focus grade, very good offensive lineman. One of the best offensive linemen that are going to be a free agent. Maybe the best offensive lineman that will be a free agent. And he also hasn't missed a single game in 4 years. This is the kind of guy that I could see bringing in. He is asking probably for like $13.5 million a year. So yeah, you're going to pay up a little bit. But if there is a guy that you're going to replace Graham Glasgow with, it's Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney has been ridiculous. And not only that, maybe, hey, if you like left guard better, all right, throw him at left guard, put Joe Dahl at right guard for now, and then go draft a right guard. You can do that, all right? You can do that kind of thing. You don't have to put Joe Thuney at right guard and make him uncomfortable. Put him at left guard and then upgrade the right guard position and just kind of flip it around a little bit. You could do that for sure. Both the guard position can use some help. So a guy like Joe Thuney, yes, he'd be getting paid more, but I think that guy is actually worth the extra pay because you're getting a great player that is young and just like Graham Glasgow. Now, Rashad Hill is up next. I looked at him. He's a little bit more of an average player, 61 Pro Football Focus grade. He's missed a few games in 2 years. He's very similar when it comes to contract. That's just not a guy I would go after. Eric Flowers, 64.2 Pro Focus grade. Again, a similar type of contract. Those guys I wouldn't go after. I'm thinking upgrade. I don't want to downgrade at a certain position like this. So now let's look at some draft picks. Who would be available in the draft? Well, I've obviously been in love with the thought of getting Tyler Biadasz. And if you look at our current draft, we have a second round, a third round, a fourth round pick, one pick in each one of those rounds. And that would mean that you're probably going to get one unless you trade back. Now, if you trade back, you could take 2 offensive linemen. I don't think the Lions will do that, but I do think they will take one in the mid rounds, which would be smart. Tyler Biadasz out of Wisconsin, I see him going somewhere in the third round. Logan Stenberg, Ben Bredesen, those are a couple options for the third round. Maybe earlier options, Cesar Ruiz in the second round. If you want to go second round offensive lineman, wouldn't be a problem. Ruiz, very good offensive lineman, can also be a versatile offensive lineman. And think about that. If you brought in a guy like Joe Thuney and Cesar Ruiz, then you're probably really upgrading that offensive line for sure. A little bit later, maybe guys like Nick Harris, Solomon Kinley, those kind of options. So rookies are great, and there's a lot of hope around them, but there's also the thought that, hey, they could be definitely bust. They haven't played in the NFL at all. They have 0 NFL experience, and you just don't know what you're going to get out of these guys. Injuries could occur. You don't know what could happen. So you have to keep in mind that when you look at some draft picks, just like Graham Glasgow's rookie year wasn't very beautiful, but he definitely came into a great player. And if you want someone that's going to be instantly great on the offensive line, which is one of your most important positions because you're protecting your most important position, then you probably want a guy that can come in and play right away. So letting Graham Glasgow go isn't the end of the world. There are options to replace him for sure. Maybe a little bit more risk involved, but there are options to replace him. However, if you can get him for $8.5 million a year for 4 years, that's definitely something that I would pay. Honestly, I'd probably pay $9 million for 4 years as well, just to make sure I have him, unless a guy like Joe Thuney said yeah to like 13. But otherwise, I think Graham Glasgow does make a lot of sense to bring back. However, if we don't bring him back, there are options out there, and the end of the world is not coming. You can still fix this because you would save a little bit of money. But yeah, I mean, there's just probably be a little bit more risk involved. So let me know your thoughts, comments below. Are you bringing back Graham Glasgow, or are you letting him walk? Thank you for watching, and I'm out.